It's an absolutely fantastic moment to be here at CogX. Great to be back in the real world, as it were. And since we've just had some interesting, some great sort of overview introductions of everybody, you're relatively cognizant of our panel, but I'll just make sure everyone knows. We've got Jouni, Helminen over there. I mean, look, you've got a whole, what the heck, we've got everybody up here. So let's get into the subject. That one of the things we will need to talk about here is that we're going to cover largely sort of the shift of social media from Web 2 into Web 3, if it happens. If it does happen, how will it happen? What are the advantages? What are the disadvantages? Where we're going to end up? And I think maybe what we should do is a little bit of an overview of what everybody's actually doing, because you just heard a little bit of a biography, but maybe if we just got a minute from everybody on what they're working in, and we'll start with Jouni over there right at the end. And if you just want to do like a 30-second download on what you're actually working on. Go for it.
Sure. So yeah, I work at Aave. It's a DeFi protocol, but we're actually building something called Lens protocol, which is it's a sort of a decentralized social media protocol, and the idea is that we have this sort of a public goods open graph that other applications can then build on top of. So instead of your profile being sort of siloed into Twitter or Facebook or whatever, all the different applications can use the same open social graph.
Fantastic. So that's this open social graph, which is very important, obviously, in social media. And then let's go to Thomas.
Yes, I'm Tom. I'm co-founder of The Round. We're an augmented reality entertainment platform. We have built a broadcast protocol that allows artists and creators to distribute live entertainment in augmented reality to mobile phones. And we're building a marketplace that allows venues, venues, festivals, theatre companies, and independent artists to build a virtual venue that they can use to create a community, which they can then monetize and reward for their engagement.
Fantastic. Now, Linda, I know that you're working on something where you can sort of effectively jump off from Web 2 into Web 3 social. Explain what you're up to.
Sure. I'm Linda. I work for a company called Mask Network. And what we're doing is we're essentially trying to bridge Web 2 and Web 3 together. And how we do that is using a open source browser extension that we use as a plugin on Web 2 applications, such as Twitter. And we build dApps on top of that.
Brilliant. I want to talk more about dApps in a minute. Finally, Henry.
Yeah, hi, I'm Henry. I'm from RSS3. If you guys are familiar with the original RSS protocol, RSS3 is basically trying to bring back that transparency, that platformless of original RSS protocol. So what we do is basically we index all your Web3 activities and aggregate them into one feed. So that's it.
Marvelous. RSS. Hands up who uses RSS today still. One per three people. Amazing. Yes, it was just an amazing technology. Really simple syndication, pulled in lots of feeds, and you could see what was going on without an algorithm view of the world, of social media, or of, say, blog posts or whatever. But kind of got bypassed by the Web 2 platforms effectively. In many ways, I often say that Facebook effectively monetized RSS and just turned it into a social feed. So it's interesting to see that concept coming back in Web 3. Jouni, perhaps if I can turn to you first. Some people are familiar with existing open source social networks like Mastodon. What's your vision of what Web 3 social media might look like?
Yeah, I really love all the kind of original open source social networks. Like I used IRC back in the 90s, Mastodon obviously like a newer version of that. I think they're all great. I think that there's a lot of room for different types of experiments and different types of platforms. I think what Web3 gives you is sort of the ownership aspect that you can't have with Web 1 or Web 2, and also helps, I think, to have more like better monetization models where the incentives of the users and the platforms are more aligned. Whereas I don't really see like a great monetization model for IRC or Mastodon. And I think this is great. You don't always need to monetize anything, but especially for creators, I think is important to have sort of a better relationship with your direct relationship, ownership of the relationship with your audience, I think, which Web3 allows.
I mean, I think that we've got to acknowledge the fact that Web 2 hasn't been really that fantastic for creators. Perhaps it might have started off well with YouTube channels and people making thousands on YouTube channels, and then social media influencers monetizing their Instagram feeds with, you know, paid placements and stuff like that. But it's got harder and harder, and the platforms like Instagram and YouTube, etc., have put the screws on influencers and content creators, haven't they, in the last few years, and raised the bar. So all of a sudden, instead of getting 200,000 views to monetize your YouTube channel, you had to get 500,000, and then you had to get 1 million, and then you had to get 10 million, and so you were not really in control. And so the prospect of Web 3 in social is that you're much more in control and you can monetize. Linda, I know that you guys are doing something where you can take your Twitter feed. Excuse me. Unfortunately, I have a bit of hay fever at the moment. It's with a small cough. You can take your Twitter feed and you can use your platform and plug into your environment and monetize in a different way. Do you want to unpack that a little bit and tell us how you think that might be a better model?
Yes, of course. I think that Web3 social is inevitable, but I think the best way to do it is not actually try to get people away from Web 2 applications, but also try to keep them there. But also,
because the problem is like, how do you get somebody off their Instagram with 100,000 followers or whatever it is, or even, you know, less, and they feel like they have to start all over again, don't they?
Right. And I think what we're trying to do is just create a way to have these Web3 features already existing on Web 2 applications.
Is it like a sort of a cuckoo in the nest strategy? Eventually, people will find that they're getting much more value out of their the protocol that they're using with you guys, for instance, and then what do? Do they just, you know, take the red pill and flip right over and start ignoring Twitter, or or go to a decentralized social platform of some description?
Yeah, absolutely. I think once people start seeing the value of being able to own their own content and being able to own what they create and monetize off of that, I think they'll start shifting to Web3.
I mean, it sounds like Shangri-La, but Henry, isn't the problem though that the reality is that as of the last couple of days, cryptocurrencies have collapsed. So are people going to become more cynical about the idea of owning your own content, monetizing your own content, but did it all turn out to be a Ponzi scheme in the end, and now they're left holding tokens valueless?
Well, I don't think so. It all comes down to the actual value of the tokens you are holding. I'm pretty sure I've heard of like the coin with a dog and everything else. So that token has no real value in the real world or Web3's world, whereas like tokens issued by us or Mask or potentially by Lens is gonna hold this whole true utilization value. So basically the idea is, if you're using our product, you're authorizing the access of your data to us. And if if you make any money out of it, basically you monetize your data and you're going to get the rewards. And so this relationship is cultivated between you and your content reader, your audience directly. And whereas in Web 2, you're looking at Instagram, you're looking at Facebook, Google, YouTube. Practically speaking, I don't think they respect your privacy at all. So they are trying to maximize their profit. Whereas in us, on our platforms, we are not trying to, make you a product. You are not free, and you have the freedom to take away your data from this platform anytime you want. And those data stay all those data, they stay the same,
So you think that you think the great advantages of people having things like self-sovereign identity, things like
Yep.
portable data.
Yes.
They can allow platforms to access their data in ways in which they can control
Yes.
those kinds of things, right?
Yes.
So, Thomas, you're doing an AR platform which will have metaverse-style applications. I want to talk about that a little bit later, but for now, you're going to allow people to monetize what they do, content creators what they're doing in your environment. Do you see Web3 social platforms? Let's call them platforms for the sake of another description at this point, or environment, shall we say? As being fundamentally better or different in some other way?
Absolutely. I think the beauty about a kind of a Web3 environment, a Web3 platform, is kind of a lot of what everyone's already been saying about that ownership of data and the ownership of the experience that you've had within it, because we all have a unique journey through any social platform that we use, and that unique journey is sellable to the highest bidder, but the reward should go back to the person who created the data in the first place. And I think one thing that Web3 actually allows for is, and I think we're going to come on to kind of AI recommendation algorithms and stuff like that, but I think one thing that Web3 allows for is a means of rewarding people for looking at content they wouldn't otherwise be engaging with. You can incentivize that kind of behavior because people won't automatically want to go and find something that isn't within their normal wheelhouse. But Web3 allows people to say, hey, I'm going to take a risk on this piece of content. I'm going to take a risk on that artist or that content creator, and then feed that back into the ecosystem as a whole. And I think that's really powerful and really beneficial for audiences. And I think for content creators, Web3 allows a much more direct relationship between artist and audience without that middleman. And I think in time, that's going to bring in huge amounts of artists as long as we kind of get over some initial skepticism.
When you say artists, I presume you mean any kind of creator of any description.
Any kind of creator of any description.
Musicians or
Yeah.
film or...
Absolutely,
Right.
yeah. Artist as the broadest topic of the word
Jouni,
artist.
your head is nodding.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I used to be involved in the music industry. I wish something like this existed back then. I think, and I'm talking. It's interesting what you say about people sort of becoming a bit skeptical, and I think it's. I can understand there's so much in the space. There's also kind of scams and like a lot of hype. But I think it's sort of this Denmark is maybe nature's way of kind of making sure that things that have real value kind of stand out, and then the other stuff kind of fades away. And I think over time people will see the real value and the sort of when I speak to musicians or creators, they're sort of a little bit polarized or unsure still. Like, is this just a sort of a big scam, or how can I use it? The more accessible we make it, like there's still a lot to do with the UX and the technology and just making it very very easy and kind of
But Linda, it feels like we're a long way away from this really becoming a practical reality, no? Wrestling control of social media from the large platforms is going to be a very tough game. In the UK, I know we've had the launch in the last 6 months of a platform called Supernova, which looks a bit like an Instagram thing. We've also had the launch of We Are 8, endorsed by British ex-footballer Rio Ferdinand. There are posters around London of this platform where you can download this thing. Another sort of Instagram-like social media thing where you watch ads and give to charity. It's a tough ball game because to lure people away. So how is it going to happen? How are we going to do it? And how long is it going to take?
I can't say how long it's going to take, but I think people still don't see the value in this because they don't actually understand the technology behind it. So I think one of the best things to do is to start educating people and start pushing people to actually start using these Web3 products and these Web3 applications to see the value.
How do you think they will see the value, though?
By using the products. So for an artist who wants to create digital art, they can mint their artwork on OpenSea and if it sells, they can see the value in how much royalties they get with how these smart contracts are set up.
Is there an age group to which your platform applies mostly? What's the demographics using it? Do you know?
For Mask Network,
Yeah.
it's just the same age group as someone who would use Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, because we just build on top of these already existing Web 2 applications.
Right. But I'm just wondering if it's more a younger demographic, perhaps.
No.
It's hard to generalize.
Yeah, it's hard to
Yes,
generalize,
probably. Yeah, fair enough. What about you? And do you think that? What sort of timeline do you think we're working on?
Well, it is happening as we speak here. But I think the most important thing is to educate people, to raise their awareness of their own privacy, because many of you sitting here probably don't know how your data is being used by large data centers, large data monopolies like Facebook. And because the moment you post anything on Facebook, you lose the control of it. Your photos are not your photos. Whereas on Web3, because we believe, I have a very strong technical background, we believe code is the law. So the moment the smart contract is deployed, nobody can change it. And we all have to play by the code, by the contract. And the moment you post your content online, and you still gain the full control of it, you can grant or revoke the access to it any moment you want. So, yeah.
Right. But you mentioned photos. Now, one of the issues with social media is that really Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, in the background have ended up employing thousands and thousands of content moderators to take down child pornography, general pornography sometimes, I suppose, as well. But certainly, problematic things like child pornography or extreme violence, etc. We're all unfortunately well aware of mass shootings, how people do live streaming of mass shootings, and how that gets out relatively simply, even if it's up for only a few minutes. How do we see that kind of content moderation playing out in Web3, or does it just not happen and it's an absolute free-for-all? Jouni, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a really important and really tough question. I think it'll come down to the clients to do a lot of it themselves. I think the one good thing is that it's all open source, so people can come together and kind of come up with whether it's sort of ranking like this, more just traditional ranking, like what do you want to see versus what you might not be interested in, but also for like spam and filtering the kind of not nice.
So are you saying that people would set their own content filters in a Web3 social environment?
Yeah, absolutely.
To say, I do not want to see this X, Y, Z. But doesn't that require the content creator to tag it in some way, and maybe they just don't?
Yeah, I think, again, we can maybe one beautiful thing about Web3 is incentives, which work very well. So we can perhaps incentivize the content creators to tag it themselves, or outsource this to other incentivized parties that do this for them or use. I think machine learning is amazing, obviously used widely in Web 2 social, but it's sort of a black box right now. So what we're really hoping to do is leverage and also the machine learning community is super open source focused, but they can't really contribute outside working at Twitter or Facebook. They can't come up with their own recommendation engines or sort of filtering engines that people could use. But I think with Web3, since the data is open, is public, others can sort of build on top of it, and we can have sort of community build.
Thomas, you look like you've got some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think in terms of content moderation, I think it's a good thing to be shifting that away from the platforms that own, the overarching platform, and driving it back into the community and the users. Because if you imagine Facebook's content moderation system's fairly hard to find out any detailed information on how they moderate content, and really it comes from the top down, so you have to look at what the political motivations are of the leadership of the company. Whereas if you maybe had a content moderation DAO, say, a group of people who come together to moderate the content from the community that are using it and then are incentivized and rewarded for their engagement, that to me sounds like a far more sustainable way of maintaining appropriate content on the platform. If you are using the platform, well, I don't want sick images being spread around this.
But
this
then you're asking, I mean, just to state the obvious, you're asking content moderators and a DAO to look at pictures of child pornography and take them down, or are they being incentive? I mean, these people end up with PTSD, by the way.
No, of course. Don't get me wrong. Yes, you have to sign up to want to do it. It's not anybody. You're not saying, hey, you signed up to our platform and now you've got to moderate content. That would be insane.
Yeah.
But you can still establish a way in which the people who are using the platform have the ability to moderate the content. And you can have resources allocated for PTSD. You can have all of those things still done. It doesn't need to be controlled by an overarching umbrella. It doesn't need to be controlled by the leadership of a company to moderate that content.
Okay, I'm not super convinced that's going to be the magic bullet, because, I mean, what we want is for it not to, really extremely problematic content to appear in the first place, I suppose. Perhaps there's a mechanism, I'm just making this up on the fly, but perhaps there's a mechanism to de-incentivize that content to appear. I think in some way?
I think it's
demerit. I don't know. If you upload child pornography, all of a sudden you're thrown off the network, or you go dark, or I don't know. What do you think?
So basically, I think the benefits of posting such content is not there. Basically, in order to cultivate your relationships between this address with all the audience, it's going to take you a long time, and you're going to be putting in a lot of effort. And if you are just misbehaving on the platform and you get thrown out, you get penalized, and I think the financial motivation is there.
Yeah. So because you're introducing effectively a financial model, then there's more inducements to demerit
and also
upload bad stuff, and
potentially whatever. I'm just thinking of this now. We have user-generated content. We can also have user-generated decision. So the entire community can get together and say, oh, we think this guy is posting something that's not suitable for this community. You get the downvote, and if this user is getting enough downvotes, maybe he gets punished.
Right.
And there's no central authority who like Zach, who gets decide say, oh, I don't like this content, probably just remove it from our platform.
And I think just picking up on that, I think also when talking about sensitive content on platforms, we should separate from outright illegal content and things like disinformation and politically motivated content. I think there's a big difference. Putting child pornography on a platform is straight up illegal, and the police should be involved immediately.
Yes.
Putting out, not moderating disinformation for political motivation is a vastly different thing, and that comes down from the leadership. So I think when we're having this conversation, we should separate those two things out.
But we're also working in an environment where the word war is now banned in Russia, and you can only say special operation. And so in the RU web, as they call it in Russia, you can only talk about a special operation and be supportive of the government, and say anything else, and they'll clap you in irons. So their version of disinformation is different to ours at the moment. That we're getting into kind of all sorts of thorny problems about autocratic governments. But in a decentralized web, does that go away? Does the government no longer has any control? That's what we're trying to say. Is that the case, Jouni?
I think definitely less control. I mean, and I think it's the good aspects are, I've been talking recently with some people from Russia, and they were just hoping that there would be a platform like this that they could use and discuss freely, and have some level of anonymity and talk about these things without fear of punishment. I think, but also I think on the positive side, there's these algorithms. We talk about sort of filtering all the algorithms to get rid of the nasty stuff, but there's many positive sides to these machine learning recommendation engines that we don't really get to enjoy, and it sort of really annoys me that the platform decides everything for me and other users, and there's amazing communities of builders who'd like to tweak their own algorithms that recommend maybe you like humor more, or maybe you like certain type of humor. It could be sort of tweaked to your liking, but you just get the kind of bog standard algorithm from the platform. And
Linda, do you think the average person? I mean, I'm unfortunately old enough to remember a time when people thought the brave new world of the internet would allow people to tweak their algorithm and select what content they'd like to see and that kind of thing. And in fact, people tended to be a little bit lazy and just would, sit back and let the thing sort of run, as it were. But do you feel that there's a new generation that wants to do that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this new generation of decentralized media heavily focuses on digital identities, and I think that having a digital identity is a part of being able to have a history of what you like and what you dislike, and that can be moved across from different platforms with blockchain technology.
Exactly. So you get a heck of a lot more control.
Exactly.
In this,
Total control,
brave
actually.
new world.
Yep.
It's actually total control.
Yeah.
Yeah, we play by the book, play by the contract. The contract says nobody can access your data, then that's it.
So let's talk a little bit about what do we expect things to happen? Do we expect a decentralized social media to look and feel like the social media that we're familiar with now, or is there other aspects of it that are just a whole new environment? So one thing that's obviously rearing its head at the moment is the discussion around this metaverse concept, which is a blending of VR, AR, as well as other platforms. Thomas, you're working on an AR platform. What kinds of vision do you have for both the sort of social media aspect of it and also the content creation aspect?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key thing about the metaverse is that these are persistent digital environments that are multiplayer. So these are shared environments that people move throughout. So when you're looking at that, social media in that kind of environment is going to be vastly different because you are interacting with people in a digital world, in a digital space. I think, also it's important to say Web3 is not the metaverse. And the metaverse can also be very much Web 2 technologies, and there's a bit of a battle. I think that we kind of take place.
Unfortunately, I think a lot of people in crypto love to be vague about that.
Yeah,
it's not helpful.
It's not. No, it's not. There are lots of Web 2 platforms operating within the metaverse space. I personally think Web 3 technology is the best technology for the metaverse because if you're imagining persistent digital worlds, venues.
And persistent digital assets as well.
And persistent digital assets that move from space to space to space. For me, decentralized kind of Web3 technologies, and again, ownership of your identity, like you were mentioning about the identity of an individual, from space to space to space is vital. You can't be going, hey, now I'm in Facebook's world, now I'm in this identity, now I'm in that world, and now having to port my content that I created over here and the value I generated over there, and it's become a nightmare and an absolute mess. So that's where Web3, I think, is really key, having a persistent identity across different metaverses and, as you said, digital assets. And I think content creation in that kind of space, and for, again, making sure artists don't get exploited, Web3 allows for as well, because it's hard to track where a song might be being played, where a piece of art might be being displayed, or where any kind of piece of entertainment and content. If you have, great thing about blockchain, great thing about smart contracts and kind of Web3 is that you can try, at least, to monitor the use of a piece of content across all of these digital environments, which I think is incredibly powerful.
It's almost like a sort of an interesting sort of patent stamp on some things. I mean, we've seen the phenomena of in the black community inventing dances to go with new songs from rap artists, and then probably everyone's familiar with this fascinating phenomena where a rap artist releases a song, and then the black community effectively invents a dance for this song, and then everyone copies it. And there was a brilliant example recently where a whole bunch of people said, "No, we're not going to invent a dance," and everyone else was like, "Oh, we're left standing, don't have anything to do." So it's like a sort of a fascinating content creation, which at the moment is just a social media phenomenon. But Linda, would you agree that it's like it's a piece of social content that in Web3 you could effectively copyright, monetize?
Yeah.
You know.
So I saw it. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think it was something on TikTok
Yeah.
about creators not being able to get credit for dances that they have essentially created.
Yeah.
And this changes with Web3 and blockchain technology because you're able to trace back who created that content.
Yeah.
And they also gain royalties from their creation, and they're able to monetize from their dances, per se, in this context.
That's quite exciting, don't you think?
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Just going back to the metaverse stuff. I mean, who do you think is going to win this war? Because there seems to be two sides of the argument that it's a kind of a hardware battle, and then there's a platform battle. But in social media, I mean, social media is kind of what got a lot of people online in the first place. Because I famously, I remember when Mark Zuckerberg stated that he just wanted to own everybody's photograph album, and he knew that once he had your photographs, you wouldn't go anywhere else. Everyone knows that in a way that's kind of like where your album lives. You know, your social album lives, and so because that's your memories, it's your family, it's your kids, or it's your whatever it is. So that's going to be that in a way. The metaverse. I'm running out of steam with my question here, but the metaverse plus social plus Web3, that's the way we hook people in. Jouni, do we?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the socially.
Someone's going to invent the killer app for social in Web3 that's going to be like our photo album.
Right, I see what you mean. I think I'm really curious to see what people come up with. I guess we're sort of building the foundational blocks, and then it's open. Is an open field for anybody to build anything on top. We're trying to help with the sort of the chicken and egg problem where we alluded to before, where you have to sort of the network effects are really powerful, exist in social media. So we're trying to basically break that down, help people like just compete on the front end. And I love what Linda is doing. Mask, I think meeting people where they are and sort of is not one or the other. I think people will be using both for a long time, and sort of maybe some apps, Web3, social media for certain things, and still using Twitter for other things.
Because at the moment, in a way, the social aspect of Web3 is NFTs, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's that is the ultimately, right at the moment, the first manifestation of social in Web3 is NFTs,
Yeah,
NFT communities.
And sort of non-financial. I think the non-financial use of blockchain basically is something we're only starting to happen now. Maybe the technology is ripe or the time is right. NFTs are like completely different audience. It's not the developers and sort of TradFi people anymore. It's artists and just very different audience. So that's been great to see. And I think we'll see more and more sort of different communities come into Web3 with more non-financial applications like social applications.
Thomas, I know you want to allow NFTs as a sort of a ticketing service in your platform. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so we're going to be using, as you said, NFTs to access virtual events, but we're looking particularly at dynamic NFTs that can basically update based upon your experience, based upon your actions. So let's say you're one of the first 5 people to show up at a virtual event, you could get a signature stamped onto your NFT, becomes rarer compared to the rest. And we think that the beautiful thing about dynamic NFTs in that way is they most effectively replicate the real world experience. If you're at a particular concert and something unique happens because it's a live event and you caught it on camera, that has social currency, maybe not value, but it has social currency. You could say, I was there in that moment. Whereas with the dynamic NFT, you can add tradable value for a unique moment that you experienced within the digital world. So we're really excited about NFTs in that capacity. And then just quickly touching on what you're saying about hardware and the metaverse and things, I think what's really important for us is kind of meeting people where they are, kind of in the way you're doing, but with the focus on mobile augmented reality. There's billions of people who have mobile phones. Like most people in the audience have mobile phones capable of delivering high-end AR experiences. And I personally think that the metaverse is going to be much more augmented reality driven rather than virtual reality. And in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll see a kind of a combination of the world, like the physical and the digital.
Won't that rely on Apple coming up with some magical glasses or something?
I think that will benefit it, but I don't think it's it's not required. Our mobile phones are incredibly powerful devices, and they can deliver.
You're talking about like holding up your mobile phone and seeing digital objects appear in space,
and it people are already looking down, but it brings you up and into the real world. AR headsets will benefit, absolutely, but the technology is a decent way off, and I think mobile is pretty good so far.
Right. And then you hold up your phone and make sure, hope that some passing cyclist doesn't swipe it out of your hand, which obviously happens now and again. What sort of things do you discuss in your company about how you're manifesting social in Web3?
So actually, RSS3, we are not a social company. And what we do is basically
But people will have social applications for the
Yes.
RSS feeds that you produce for social.
Yes, we produce all those feeds, all those activities user is participating in, and we leave that to all developers to decide, whatever applications you want to develop. Here is the aggregated result of those users. We don't limit the scope of say, you must focus on social, you must focus on DeFi or. Yeah.
I mean, the technical aspects of this are interesting because there used to be a protocol many years ago called FOF, friend of a friend, and so it was like an API to see where this friend, and then you could see a friend of a friend. It was like an open source version of a social media network in a way. Do you see people sort of inventing whole new ways of interrogating their social network in Web3 that we haven't seen before? Or getting data out of it, or pulling their own analytics, or?
Well, again, it's all by the contract. You have the ultimate control over who can access your data,
right,
and you can revoke it at any time you want. Of course, if you want to utilize some third-party services, you need to authorize, but you know exactly who has the access, and they must tell you what they are going to do with your data. Unlike, those centralized platform, they just monetize your data. They just, treat you as a product. You have no control over, I give my, for instance, date of birth, and you have no idea where the data is now and who has the access.
So we've got 5 minutes left, so let's go have some closing sort of thoughts from you guys about the sort of timelines we're working on, because we mentioned earlier that NFTs to some extent are one of the first manifestations of social in Web3. If we were running this panel in a year's time, let's go for a year, because that's, a lot can happen in a year, as we all know. What sort of things would you say that someone's invented the killer app for social in Web3 and just dropped it, and bang, everyone's moved from Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok over to this new environment, and it is a sort of Shangri-La of open source, and you control your own content, etc. Will that be built on Ethereum? Will it be built on some other blockchain? Will it? It'd be interesting to say what would happen in a year's time. So let's start with you, Henry.
Frankly speaking, I don't think there's going to be a mega app or monopoly in Web3.
Right.
I think there are going to be many boutique platforms where each community has its own, character. For example, I focus on dancing. I focus on, photo taking or whatever themes, and the Web3 does not really limit what you can share there, and you can join multiple communities at the same time. And if you think it's time to leave, you can just take your data and leave.
And you think that's going to be fine in a year's time, roughly?
I think it's already happening.
It's already happening.
Yes.
Linda?
I think really focusing on digital identity and being able to move it across platforms. Hopefully someone builds something. I think Jack Dorsey's trying to do that with
Web 5.
Web 5. We
Yeah.
completely skipped Web 4, I guess. But you're able to drop information from Gmail to Yahoo. Why can't we move our history and our digital identity from Instagram to Twitter? So I hope someone is able to build something like that.
Maybe it'll be you guys.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
We're
I
already
think the
progress.
strategy of this sort of cuckoo in the nest approach, or shall we say, probably not what you call it, but certainly being able to sort of do a plug-in approach to it is a very interesting one, certainly, leveraging existing social platforms. Thomas.
In a year's time, I think the biggest difference we're going to see is with the user experience of kind of buying digital assets, of kind of using Web3 technology. I think we're increasingly going to see the Web3 side moving further and further and further into the background. And then the kind of the presentation of these platforms being not too dissimilar to platforms people are already used to using. I think that's the biggest, and I hope that's the biggest change that we see in the next year, because that has to happen first before you can onboard everybody else. And there's some brilliant people already working on that, buying digital assets with credit cards on chain. Like that kind of stuff is vitally important and is happening right now and will be a big difference in a year.
Yeah, I totally concur. The user interface for many Web3 products is just not great, let's be honest. So hopefully somebody can crack that. I mean, shouldn't be that hard. Jouni, what's your thinking?
I actually agree with all three before, but just to riff off what Thomas said about the user interface, I think we're working very hard on that at Aave, basically to create a user experience where you still have a non-custodial wallet living on your client, but you don't have to have MetaMask pop-ups, or you don't have to learn how Web3 works. It's a bit like you don't need to know the plumbing, you don't need to know how your car works to be able to drive it, I think. So I think we'll make some really good roadway this year, and I think the monetization of content culture will start happening this year as well. I think it'll just keep growing, but I think we'll start intertwine with the conversation. Right now you got NFT platforms that sort of people can release this art. Usually it's just a link to the JPEG or the MP3, so we'll see more unlockables where the NFT is more like an access key to some other content, where it's on-chain or digital content or even real-world content. I think we'll see many more use cases around that, and then just the conversation intertwined with these NFTs, I think.
Well, it sounds exciting. I do hope it fixes some of the problems we've seen in Web 2 with social media, because anything would be better than some of the stuff we have to go through at this point. But I just want to say thank you very much, everybody, for attending this. And let's big round of applause for Jouni Helminen, Director of Aave, Thomas Winsor from The Round, Linda Yeboah from Mask Network, and Henry Wang from RSS3, and from me, Mike Butcher from TechCrunch. I hope you have a great day at CogX. Have a good day. Cheers.